My name is Alex, and I recently turned 35. For most of my life, I blended into the background like a shadow cast by brighter souls. I wrote code, debugged other people's messes, and thought of myself as the sort of man whose presence was appreciated only in quiet reliability. 6 years ago, I married Jessica, a woman who could have been carved from fireworks. She dazzled every room, orbiting through crowds on impossibly high heels, throwing her laugh like confetti. I told myself our differences were complementary, that my calm would anchor her storm and her fire would thaw my reserve. I thought love was a verb. Flowers purchased on gray Tuesdays, late-night pharmacy runs when she had headaches. The way I memorized the order in which lights along Maple Avenue turned green, so she never had to break heart on her commute. Jessica's birthdays were festivals. Mine were quiet tea-lit corners. Yet in early March she announced that my 35th required a memory no one would forget. She spent weeks whispering with her relatives, clicking through online catalogs, forbidding me from opening certain closets. I felt both nervous and giddy, half expecting a surprise trip to Kyoto or perhaps the ultrasound photo of a first child. The night arrived. Our living room had been drenched in gold streamers and helium balloons that throbbed against the ceiling like captive suns. Every person who mattered to Jessica was there, and I smiled and accepted hugs that smelled of perfume I couldn't name. When the chatter settled, Jessica climbed the brick steps in front of the fireplace, held up a burgundy folder, and asked if I was ready for the headline act. Phones came out. I braced myself for flash photography, maybe a karaoke rendition of a song we danced to at our wedding. Instead, she declared, with game show flourish, that the folder contained our divorce papers. Somewhere in the back, a champagne cork popped, perfect comedic timing, and laughter erupted like someone had hit a laugh track button. Her father slapped the mantel, howling about finally rescuing his daughter from mediocrity. My signature, she said, would be the grand finale. I felt no blood in my hands, only an electric numbness. Years of quiet gestures flashed by, me scrubbing her aunt's wine stain out of the white carpet at 2 a.m., the time I pretended to crave roller coasters despite my vertigo so she wouldn't ride alone. They vanished in a puff of performative cruelty. Yet instead of shattering, something inside me clicked into place, like code compiling without errors after months of silent bugs. I signed, closed the folder, wished her a good evening, and walked out. I didn't slam the door. The party soundtrack followed me down the driveway until the winter air folded it into silence. The first nights were raw. I kept hearing phantom laughter every time the fridge motor kicked on. I deleted our shared playlists, boxed the souvenirs, but left one photo on my desk as a test. If I could look at it without pain, progress was measurable. I filled empty hours with motion. Morning runs along the river, evening classes in Muay Thai where bruises bloomed like planetary nebulae on my shins. Pain with purpose felt righteous. By summer, my reflection belonged to someone leaner, shoulders unconsciously pulled back. I steadier. Confidence grows quietly. One day you open a jar without tapping the lid first and realize you've changed. Opportunity followed momentum. At a hackathon I almost skipped, I joined a ragtag team that built a prototype using edge device federated learning. Investors lingered. One offered us seed money. Within months I had stock options, a sunrise commute to a revitalized warehouse office, and colleagues who debated compiler flags the way sports fans argue penalties. I bought a house with a grapefruit tree in the yard and painted the spare bedroom midnight blue, not for a nursery but a planetarium of my own design. Tiny fiber optic stars that pulsed to NASA telemetry data. Solitude had turned from void into canvas. My therapist, because yes, I finally hired one instead of pretending stoicism was therapy, suggested I catalog moments of unexpected joy, the barista spelling my name correctly. The stray kitten that decided my porch was sanctuary, the neighbor who returned a mis-delivered package with an origami crane on top. I stored these micro-victories in an encrypted journal app one wrote myself, one that only opened after I solved a daily programming puzzle. Gamified healing. Even the pain of the divorce became a kind of strange currency, a story I can spin to buy someone else's empathy. Then the dreams started. Not nightmares, exactly. I was standing backstage, blinded by spotlights, while unseen hands clapped and jeered. Each time a voice like Jessica's asked, "Are you ready for your surprise?" and thrust some object into my hands, a melting clock, a music box filled with sand, once a nest of writhing wires that hummed my heartbeat. I would wake before I could answer. Instead of dreading sleep, I wrote the dreams down, curious what my subconscious was debugging. 6 months passed like that, an era in startup time, a blink in geological. On the very day we would have celebrated our 7th anniversary, I woke early, brewed coffee strong enough to wake a graveyard, and backed the car out of the garage. That's when I saw her. Jessica was curled in the driver's seat of our old road trip sedan, the one we'd argued about selling. Frost stippled the windshield. Her hair, once war paint bright, hung limp, and her eyeliner had migrated down her cheeks. On the dashboard her phone pulsed faintly. 14 unread messages to me. Most begged for conversation. Some insisted none of what happened at the party had been her idea. Others swung toward apology, heavy with nostalgia for campfire nights on the Pacific coast, for how I'd carried her after she twisted an ankle on our honeymoon hike. The timestamps mapped a desperate orbit, sent at 3:07 a.m., 3:11, 3:14, each a little closer to emotional singularity. Our eyes met through 2 panes of glass and several parsecs of changed futures. She mouthed my name. I remembered the way she used to say it when the world felt conspiratorial in our favor. Now it was a plea. I could have invited her inside for coffee, for closure, for self-sabotage masquerading as mercy. But the man I'd become understood that some bugs or features, some doors, once closed, should be sealed against rollback. I placed my travel mug in the cup holder, shifted into drive, and eased past her bumper. No horn, no revving engine, just motion. In the rearview mirror, she blurred into the winter light until she was indistinguishable from any other traveler who had taken a wrong exit. Perhaps she would rebuild, perhaps she would not. That was her code base to refactor. As for me, the road angled towards sunrise, and I accelerated until the engine's purr harmonized with my pulse. Somewhere ahead waited new bugs, new branches, new versions of Alex still in beta. I drove on, humming softly, perfectly okay with not knowing the next surprise. I met Jessica 9 winters earlier in a coffee shop that doubled as a used book cave. She was wearing headphones too large for her head, dancing silently while leafing through a dog-eared copy of Bradbury. A lock of her hair, cherry red back then, dipped into her latte foam each time she nodded to the beat. I pointed it out. She laughed, wiped the foam, and asked if I believed that every latte carried a secret message in its swirl. I said perhaps mine read, "Caution, contents may ignite." She called that cute and offered me the left ear cup so I could share the music. We listened to a song with no lyrics, just crackling saxophone layered over street corner traffic noise, something she'd found on an indie blog. That's when I realized I was in trouble. Our courtship unfolded in code reviews and rooftop picnics. I wrote her a script that turned typed keystrokes into bursts of piano notes. She replied by graffiti ing chalk constellations on the city sidewalk beneath my office window, so I would look down and see Orion aiming at my desk. Some nights we explored abandoned railway tunnels with only our phone flashlights, pretending the rusted tracks were the spine of a sleeping dragon. Each adventure felt like a commit to a repository of shared myths. Marriage muted none of her theatrics, it simply gave them better acoustics. Dinners with her family resembled talk show panels. Overlapping opinions, rapid-fire jokes, somebody always performing a magic trick with silverware. I learned to occupy negative space, to applaud at the right beats, to fetch wine before an uncle noticed his glass was half empty. Jessica once said I was the only one who could hear her thoughts beneath the noise. She'd tap my knee 5 times under the table to indicate she needed rescuing from her own party. I'd invent a reason for us to duck into the garden and breathe. Small covert operations that felt romantic. But small cracks appeared like hairline fractures and tempered glass. She complained I was too predictable, that romance should be wild, not scheduled between sprint retros and dentist appointments. Surprise me, she'd say, and when I booked an impromptu weekend in a treehouse hotel, she dismissed it as Instagram bait. When I tried minimalist gesture, leaving poems in her coat pocket, she called them puzzles and said she was tired of decoding me. I didn't understand. Hadn't spontaneity been our dialect? Enter Sebastian, smile like a sponsored influencer, jawline approved by architects. He'd been hired as a consultant at her marketing firm, the sort who used the word brand cape, without irony. I met him exactly twice. First at a charity gala where he complimented my vintage suit, second at an escape room double date that Jessica arranged. Sebastian solved nothing, but he charmed the game master into revealing clues. Jessica beamed, and I felt an algorithmic warning flash. High risk factor detected. Update pending. The night after that date, she stayed late at work 3 times in a week. One particularly surreal Thursday, I arrived home to find Sebastian in my kitchen, sautéing shrimp like it was his stage. Jessica had apparently invited him to show me how a real extrovert spices things up. He narrated each sprinkle of paprika as though hosting a cooking show. I tried a polite retreat to my study. He followed, waving a sizzling pan dangerously close to my gaming keyboard. Only later did I discover that same keyboard had been drenched in marinade. Little sabotage, almost funny. Almost. Looking back, the birthday humiliation was not a bolt from blue but a function of nested if-else statements I had ignored. There were hints, a group chat renamed Operation Freedom, a credit card alert for party supplies tagged D-Day. I dismissed them as inside jokes. Trust, like any algorithm, can throw exceptions when fed malformed data. In the immediate aftermath of the party, I lived in a short-term rental above a bakery. Each dawn the scent of almond croissants hacked past my depression firewall and forced me out of bed. I befriended the night baker, Noura, who moonlit as a cybersecurity student. Over espresso shots, we compared buffer overflows in pastry bags to overflows in C libraries. She reminded me that corrupted memory can be patched, given time and correct input. Around that period, strange emails began arriving from addresses like noreply@fortitude.solutions. They appeared blank but contained zero-width characters which, when decoded, revealed quotes about rebirth from obscure philosophers. I suspected Noura, but she swore innocence. Eventually, I traced the source to a dead domain registered in Jessica's maiden name. Whether she sent them or Sebastian toyed with me, I never learned. The ambiguity oddly eased my paranoia. Ghosts make less threatening adversaries than identifiable humans. The startup, dubbed Locust Link, specialized in decentralized swarm intelligence for autonomous delivery drones. Think packages navigating like flocks of starlings. During our first investor demo, an entire cluster crashed, threatening to tangle 30 quadcopters in midair. I spotted the bug, a race condition in the consensus protocol. Patching live code while drones whirred overhead granted an adrenaline high more potent than any romantic gesture I had ever attempted. After we landed funding, my co-founders insisted I take the CTO title. I compromised on chief refactorer. Titles matter less than merge requests. Investors dragged us to conferences. Lisbon, Seoul, Reykjavik. In Iceland's dim December, I soaked in a geothermal pool at 1 a.m. Snowflakes evaporating before they could touch the water, and for the first time admitted aloud, to no one, I am happy. The declaration echoed off basalt cliffs into the northern lights. 2 tourists overheard and cheered. We shared midnight noodles and exchanged stories of losses survived. I wrote their names in my journal as proof that strangers can witness your pivot moment and keep it sacred. Not everyone applauded my renaissance. One night, our staging servers were hit by a sophisticated injection attack that tried to reroute drone telemetry to a private IP. Logs traced back to an apartment leased by Sebastian. I passed the evidence to law enforcement and, for dramatic effect, to Jessica's work email. She replied only with a single ellipsis. The attack fizzled. My resolve hardened. You can DDoS a network, but not a man who finally knows his bandwidth. I also adopted a mentor, Ellis, a 73-year-old retired compiler engineer who coded on a mechanical keyboard dating back to the space race. We met at a local maker fair when he corrected my misunderstanding of static linking. Ellis invited me to weekly chess, refused to let me gloat when I finally won, and warned me in the same breath that success after heartbreak can turn to vanity if left untested. Write unit tests for your soul, he said, or integration will fail when the next person joins your team. Speaking of next persons, there was Maya, a UX designer with streaks of teal in her hair and a habit of sketching wireframes on napkins. She called my codebase elegantly brutalist and mocked my playlist for lacking anything recorded after 2012. We debated pointer arithmetic over ramen and accidentally closed the restaurant. Yet I kept our connection in beta, terrified of premature deployment. Growth sometimes means acknowledging that fear itself is a feature flag you can toggle off. By the time Jessica's messages blinked across her cracked phone screen, I had nearly forgotten the cadence of her typing. The Alex she once knew would have opened the passenger door, offered a coat, maybe a plan, because solutions were my reflex. This newer build recognized that not every exception should be caught. Some must crash the program, so you learn to write better code next time. So I left her there, engine idling, frost melting slowly into droplets that traced the same downward paths as her tears. As I merged onto the highway, my thoughts parsed the past in asynchronous threads, each returning a future promise rather than a regret. I whispered goodbye, not to Jessica, but to the version of myself who needed applause to validate value. The skyline ahead flickered with city lights forming a new constellation, and somewhere within it I imagined Maya debating color gradients with a developer too stubborn to admit dark mode could have shades of lavender. I laughed, accelerated, and let the road's white lines guide me like syntax highlighting toward whatever story awaited in the commit after this one. Remember the stray kitten? I named her Patch, after the critical security updates we too often postpone. Patch initially trusted no one, darting beneath the porch whenever a door hinge sighed. Winning her confidence became a micro-quest, a spoonful of tuna at 6 p.m. sharp, a loop of gentle conversation so she'd associate my voice with predictability. The first night she allowed me to scruff her, I discovered a fractured hind leg. The veterinarian fitted a minuscule cast pattern with cartoon fish, and I joked that even cats come with fish-themed dependency packages. 3 weeks later, she was bounding across my keyboard, committing nonsense strings to the repository. I left one garbled commit message in production as a hidden Easter egg. Meow underscore there underscore r underscore no underscore bugs underscore only underscore features. It became company legend. The dreams evolved too. One night I walked through a gallery of mirrors, each reflecting alternate timelines. In one, Jessica and I still held hands at farmer markets. In another, I never left the coffee shop, and she danced forever alone among paperbacks. A docent, faceless, but wearing my high school track uniform, guided me to the final mirror, which showed nothing but a blank terminal cursor blinking. "Your future is still compiling," the docent said, voice glitching between masculine and mechanical. I woke before dawn and typed the experience into my dream log, deciding that a blinking cursor is the most honest depiction of potential. There was also the incident at the venture capital retreat, an opulent affair on a converted oil rig repurposed as a luxury resort. On the second evening, after panels about disruptive supply chains, the power went out, trapping guests in glass elevators suspended over Black Sea. Panic brewed, phones lost signal, and someone started a rumor about pirates. While executives hyperventilated, my co-founder Leo and I commandeered a server closet, jury-rigging a bypass using a portable generator and 2 Ethernet cables. 5 minutes later, the lights pulsed back. The resort manager offered us lifetime memberships. We requested open-source contributions instead. Nobody understood the joke, but the look on the VC's faces, priceless. News of Sebastian's legal troubles surfaced quietly, a footnote in an industry newsletter. Marketing strategist indicted on multiple cybercrime counts. Jessica's name appeared nowhere, but I imagined her reading the article, feeling the cold realization that charisma without integrity is merely malware in a handsome wrapper. I did not screenshot it, did not forward it. Some validations are best savored in private silence. Patch now sleeps atop my 3D printer, purring counterpoint to its stepper motors. The grapefruit tree outside is heavy with fruit, and neighbors knock requesting trade. Citrus for fresh sourdough, for rooftop honey, for conversation. Community, it turns out, is a peer-to-peer network, packets of kindness hopping across driveways. Tonight, as stars pierce the sky like LEDs on a motherboard, I open the planetarium room, project the latest telescope data, and let constellations rewrite the endings of my old stories. Somewhere beyond Orion, a drone I helped design zips a medical package to a patient who might live because lines of code once stitched my broken heart back together. And that, I decide, is the most unexpected surprise of all. Before sleep claims me, I reread the 14 unanswered messages stored in a folder labeled History for regret. Deleting them would mimic deleting old branches, satisfying until you realize the bug report lives only in the diff. Instead, I prepend comments, noting what each line taught me about vanity, silence, and the fragility of public spectacle. I tag the file with a commit message, document_wisdom_v1.0. The kitten patch circles twice on my chest, her purr matching the whir of backup fans in the server rack. Outside, bamboo chimes Jessica bought on a forgotten road trip knock together in a regular 7/8 time, transforming past debris into a curious lullaby. I smile at their syncopation. Even artifacts from a failed equation can resolve into music when variables finally find their rightful type. The cursor blinks, ready for tomorrow's push, and I exhale, content to let the night compile.